Hi there, it's Llarold, and today I've got our preview of Protection Paladins in Shadowlands. Here's the usual disclaimer that beta stuff is subject to change. In fact, a significant change just went out minutes ago, and if you want things to change in a particular way, the best way to accomplish that is to provide feedback via the official forums. Protection Paladins have received a redesign of their resource system. They're back to using Holy Power, and they feel a lot more like they did in Mists of Pandaria and Warlords of Draenor, but with some significant alterations. In general, the class is performing pretty well. It's very popular, it's very fun, and I think it's probably the most successful of all the tank revamps going into Shadowlands. Before moving on to the specifics of the new stuff, let me briefly cover how Prot Pallies handled in BFA. I can sum it up simply. They've been pretty good. They haven't been one of the most popular tanks in Mythic Plus or raids at any point in the expansion, but they haven't been one of the least popular either. They're basically sat right around the middle. When DK Monk and Warrior were rising and falling in popularity and strength, Paladin was remaining consistent. It's a good, reliable class that has a lot of powerful utility, but Shield of the Righteous uptime can be a little spotty, and they are still susceptible to burst damage, so the class has some weaknesses as well. Alright, so now let's get to the class changes in Shadowlands, and let's start with what's being removed. Azerite bonuses and essences are going away, and Prot Pally had some useful bonuses from Azerite. It's nothing you can't live without, and you're really gaining, I think, more than you're losing with the redesign of the class. The only one I've really noticed missing is Inspiring Vanguard. Losing an extra 5% chance for Grand Crusader to proc sucks. That is about it, though. Now let's move on to the big list of skills being added and changed. I'll start with the most important abilities and move to the least important. First, it's not an ability, but it is a big deal. Holy Power is back, and it's replaced the Shield of the Righteous charges system. This restores the rotational impact to some of the abilities that have come to feel less meaningful since Legion, specifically Avenger Shield and Hammer of the Righteous. They're Holy Power generators now, which means they don't just exist to deal damage, they have a useful defensive value as well. Unfortunately, this change means that unlike in Legion and BFA where you would open up combat with 3 charges of Shield of the Righteous and you could easily start with 15 seconds of AM uptime, now you're going to start with 0. That could be a problem, except for Avenger Shield, which now generates 1 Holy Power per cast. It also generates 1 extra Holy Power the first time it hits an enemy. This means if you toss a shield into a pack of 3 mobs, you'll start off the fight with 4 Holy Power. This helps offset the changes to the Shield of the Righteous system fairly nicely. Avenger Shield no longer increases the effects of your next Shield of the Righteous by 20%, but that's fine, I guess. Judgment has also been revamped. It now works like Ret's Judgment, causing your target to take 25% extra damage from your next Holy Power ability. Weirdly, it does not generate Holy Power. It initially did, and I really enjoyed that playstyle. Unfortunately, its interaction with the talent Crusader's Judgment was causing Prot Pallies to generate too much Holy Power, and maintaining extremely high uptime on Shield of the Righteous was really easy. I think the better move would have been to just nerf Crusader's Judgment in some way rather than the base skill, but I don't make design decisions at Blizzard. Light of the Protector has had its name changed to Word of Glory, and you can cast it on allies by default now. The extra healing based on how low your health is has been increased from 200% to 300%, which is a nice buff. It costs 3 Holy Power and is unfortunately still on the GCD, which causes some issues, but it is no longer on a cooldown. Casting Judgment reduces its cost by 1 Holy Power. This means you have roughly the same cooldown on free self-heals, but you can also spend resources casting heals on yourself if you need as well. Hammer of the Righteous also generates 1 Holy Power, but it's otherwise the same, relatively weak skill it's always been. Hammer of Wrath is back, and it is terrific. It deals good damage, it's a useful holy power generator, and it gives the rotation a nice change of feel during the execute phase. It's offensively powerful, it's defensively powerful, it's excellent. The warrior class designer could really take some notes from this. This is how you reintroduce an execute to a tank class. And now onto the rest of the new stuff that's all relatively minor. Turn Evil is back, you can fear undead, demons, and so on. Pretty boring. Since Undead is back, who cares? Auras are back, just in case you wanted to be annoyed by having to spend keybinds and GCDs activating incredibly minor bonuses. Devotion Aura is probably the only one you'll ever want to run while tanking. Crusader Aura's fine for questing, Concentration Aura for PvP I guess, and Retribution Aura if you expect someone to die soon. I would be fine with these not coming back. They're passive, they're boring, and they're just one more thing for players to have to keep track of, or more realistically, forget and be annoyed by the people in your group about. There is only one interesting leveling bonus, and that's Avenging Wrath Rank 2. It takes an already great cooldown in Wings and an already great ability in Hammer of Wrath and just merges them together. It's great. Now let's move on to talents. While this looks mostly the same, the return to Holy Power means we've gotten back some old talents, and some other talents that still have the same name and icon have been completely redesigned. Alright, in Tier 1, Holy Shield is the same, and Blessed Hammer reduces the next hit from an enemy by a portion of your attack power, so it can affect spell damage. I think Blessed Hammer is going to be the right choice most of the time due to clearly being the best option for Holy Power generation, and it provides a pretty nice damage and defensive boost on its own. It even offers the somewhat useful ability to generate Holy Power without being anywhere near an enemy. That's not bad. Also, Readout was totally redesigned, and with its 10-second duration, I think it'll be pretty easy to keep up all the time at max stacks, but it is basically just 6% strength and stamina. That's not great. I don't think it'll be competitive. In the second tier, First Avenger has been totally redesigned. It offers a bonus similar to two of the best Azerite powers. It seems really strong as both a defensive and offensive option in Mythic Plus. My only complaint is that I wish it still increased the Grand Crusader proc chance. Crusader's Judgment is basically unchanged, but the changes to Judgment mean it's pretty much useless defensively. It's still very strong offensively, and I still think it'll be used more often due to the damage it adds. The rotation feels empty without it. Moment of Glory is new, and it basically gives you 4 back-to-back-to-back-to-back Avenger shields every 90 seconds. It's an interesting burst damage cooldown, but I can't imagine it'll ever provide as much offensive power as Crusader's Judgment over the course of a fight. It certainly won't be as powerful defensively as First Avenger, at least in AoE. Maybe it'll be interesting if you have to do 4 interrupts in a really short span of time. I cannot imagine a scenario where that would happen, but maybe. Tier 3 is almost the same, although Fist of Judgment is reduced by spending Holy Power now. I still prefer the AoE crowd control of Blinding Light, but Hand of Justice can have a pretty short cooldown, and that's not bad. In Tier 4, Unbreakable Spirit has been moved up from Tier 5. This tier becomes incredibly situational. There's not really a lot more to say. Any of these talents could be good at any situation, you just kinda have to take what you need at the time. The next tier is completely redesigned. Divine Purpose is back for Prot Pallies, and it will provide the biggest increase in Shield of the Righteous uptime. It's clearly the most consistent defensive option. Holy Avenger provides a huge boost of Shield of the Righteous uptime, but due to the active mitigation duration cap, you're gonna wind up wasting most of it. This is an ability that used to be great, but the modern state of the game has basically made it worthless. It's also on the GCD. You hate to see it. Finally, Seraphim has been moved up from the final tier. It's the same as it is in BFA, a big chunk of stats with 33% uptime, and unfortunately, it is also still on the GCD. It directly reduces your Shield of the Righteous uptime by about 10%, and Divine Purpose increases it by about 15%. Gee, I wonder which one will be the better choice for rating in Mythic Plus. Seraphim could still be the better option for parsing, it really depends on the fight links, burst damage phases, and so on, but this looks like an easy one-option tier. In Tier 6, Hand of the Protector has been moved down here, and it makes your spot healing stronger if you're willing to do that. Consecrated Ground and Judgment of Light are still here. Judgment of Light was buffed by 50%, but it's still not a huge source of healing. The increased radius and the AoE slow from Consecrated Ground will probably be the right choice most of the time. And finally, the last tier is another that's been heavily redesigned. Final Stand is down here next to two really appealing talents, and that's a shame. I really liked Final Stand during BFA, but it's hard to justify ever taking that over the other two options. Sanctified Wrath made a lot more sense back when Judgment generated one holy power. You pop wings, you use Judgment, you get a Shield of the Righteous. Simple, easy to wrap my head around. Now it feels pretty disorienting and weird, and it makes a totally different priority for your abilities inside and outside of wings. 25% longer wings duration is still very good, but it's just weird. It's really, really weird to play with. Righteous Protector was redesigned and now affects wings and Pally's shield wall, and that's big. Even with the nerf to Judgment, you generate and spend a lot of holy power, and this means that Paladins running Righteous Protector are going to have access to wings and shield wall pretty often. It's sad to me that anger management for warriors was nerfed so heavily and Paladins were given a better version, but hey, Paladins were totally given a better version. Like warrior? Why not play Paladin instead? Rotationally, Prot Paladin is the most changed of all 6 tanks, and it's not even close. The abilities are mostly the same, but the way they work is completely different. I like the class a lot more, and I already liked Prot Pallies in BFA. Getting used to Judgment not affecting Shield of the Righteous uptime is still pretty disorienting, and Avenger's Shield generating huge chunks of holy power the first time you cast it into a pack can cause some resource capping. But still, the class feels pretty strong. The redesign of the resource system means that the usage rate and pattern of Shield of the Righteous is very different. You really can't bank resources on Paladin and Shadowlands the way you can in BFA. This leads to a pattern of Shield of the Righteous uptime that looks more like a constant rotation between up, down, instead of the BFA style, which was longer periods of active and inactive Shield of the Righteous time. It takes some adjustment. Fortunately, the class will change with the pre-patch, which should give, I think, plenty of time to get comfortable before Shadowlands goes live. Alright, we've made it to the most important section of this video. We've covered everything that's changing for the base class, we're about to move on to all the new Shadowlands features and bonuses, but first, I'm going to ask the 3 most important questions about the class. Is it good? Is it fun? And how does it compare to the other classes? Starting with is it good? Yes, Prot Pallies still has all the same awesome utility it always has. It's still doing incredible amounts of single target damage when cooldowns are active, it still has a ton of self-healing, and it still has really strong active mitigation when it's active. Is it fun? Yes, I think Pally is more fun than it has been since Warlords of Draenor. Hammer of Wrath coming back was really, really nice. The talent revamp was extensive and aggressive, but I think it was really successful. And finally, how does it compare to other tanks? Very favorably. The downside of Prot Pallies has always been Shield of the Righteous's uptime and downtime. And I still think that's an issue. That lone downside aside, Avenger's Shield provides so many valuable interrupts in dungeons and raids. Their self-healing is great, their group utility is unparalleled among tanks, and they have great defensive and offensive cooldowns. It's still a very good class. I think Blood DK and Brewmaster Monk will probably be slightly better to start off the expansion, but it's going to be close. And unlike either of those two, Paladin's damage is not pathetic. Alright, let's get on to Covenant abilities. Depending on which of the 4 Covenants you choose, you'll gain access to 2 abilities. The first is called the Signature ability, and it's a utility skill that applies to everyone who chooses the Covenant, regardless of their class. The other is a class-specific skill for everyone who chooses a given covenant. Let's start with the Kyrian Covenant. The signature ability is Summon Steward. You summon a friendly little non-combat minion, who gives you a reusable health pot that removes curses, diseases, poisons, and bleeds. Your steward can also function as a vendor or a respec tome. He's a pretty helpful little guy. He's definitely the least complicated covenant ability, but he is very good. The health potion is weaker than a normal health potion and it's on the same cooldown, but the ability to remove bleeds should be very powerful based on initial raid testing. It's maybe a little less powerful for Protection Paladins since they have access to Divine Shield and Blessing of Protection to remove bleeds on their own, but having another way to do it is still very nice. The Paladin ability is Divine Toll. It casts Avenger Shield on up to 5 nearby enemies. Each one generates holy power, so you can easily get an instant 5 holy power and 5 blanket silences in AoE on a 1-minute cooldown. It's awesome. The only downside of this ability is that in single target, it's Avenger Shield on a 1-minute cooldown with no chance for Grand Crusader resets. That's pretty lame. I love this one when you're in AoE, it's by far my favorite, but the downside is pretty substantial. Necrolords are up next. Their Covenant ability is Fleshcraft, and it's a 4-second channel that isn't interrupted by damage. It grants you a shield worth 20% of your health pool, although that can go up to 50% if you're standing over the corpse of an elite. This is my least favorite of the Covenant signature abilities. After killing a pack in a mythic dungeon before you move to pull the next one, this is a good bonus. Starting off combat with a big absorb shield can save your healer some mana and make pulls safer while you're still getting Shield of the Righteous active. It won't last that long, and it's not a defensive cooldown, it's not providing extra health, and it's not practical to channel mid-combat. I think this is a better option for non-tanks. With all the self-healing tools that Pallies have, I don't think that this will wind up being a great bonus, but I may be wrong. The Necrolord class skill for Pallies is Vanquisher's Hammer, which was just buffed by 40% like 10 minutes before I started recording this. It now deals a respectable amount of single target damage, but still less than a single Hammer of Wrath, and it makes your next Word of Glory cast a free Shield of the Righteous. On the one hand, this is a useful, consistent defensive bonus. It adds 9 seconds of Shield of the Righteous uptime per minute, which is pretty good, and the free Shield of the Righteous can trigger effects like Divine Purpose, but it can also consume Divine Purpose that's triggered by the Word of Glory, so it's not perfect. Also, the hammer costs 1 holy power. Not only is that just weird, it does kind of break the flow of generating and spending holy power 3 at a time. Finally, the base skill just doesn't deal enough damage to justify being pure single target. Even after the buff today, which is probably the last we'll see to buffing the damage of this skill, it does less than 1 Hammer of Wrath. That's a cooldown? This is a safe defensive option, and Necrolord might wind up being the covenant of choice for high-level Mythic Plus pushing, but for most players, I don't really think it's all that great. Next is the Night Fae. Their signature skill is Soul Shape, which gives you a short, minor speed boost that you can reactivate to blink forward 15 yards. It looks great, but it ends early if you use offensive skills, so it's sort of like a second Divine Steed, but maybe a little worse. It's not bad, but it's not great. The Night Fae class ability for Pallies is Blessing of Seasons. It's by far the most complicated Covenant ability, and it was just nerfed by 50%, like, just before I started recording this. I had some very, very strong opinions about this ability because it's the most problematic of probably any of the Covenant abilities available to any class. People are going to get into fights over this ability. So here's how it works. Blessing of Seasons grants you a rotating series of blessings based on the 4 seasons. The blessings last for 30 seconds and have a 45-second cooldown. It was 30 seconds allowing for 100% uptime, but that was what was just nerfed. And I really think it might have transformed this from being a good but deeply problematic choice into one that just kind of sucks. So anyway, here's how it works just for posterity. Casting Spring causes the next cast to be Summer. Using Summer makes the next one Autumn, and so on. Spring grants increased healing done and received. Your raid's healers will probably fight over this, but realistically, it probably should go to a Blood DK or a Brewmaster Monk or you. Yeah, see, we're already off to a problem. Summer grants a chance to deal extra damage, and it's basically a 12% damage increase while it's active. Literally all players who deal damage will want this. Are you ready to give it away? I'm not. Autumn grants 50% cooldown reduction for 30 seconds. All abilities cool down 50% faster while Autumn is active. Look here, see how much faster Avenging Wrath is cooling down than my trinket? There's no one who won't want to take this from you, and you will want to keep it for yourself too. And finally, Winter adds minor frost damage and a stacking move speed and attack speed slow onto attacks. It doesn't work from spells, and it's the only one of the bunch that really isn't impressive at all. This whole ability creates some serious issues, and some social pressure to be a buff bot for other players. I really don't like that. I don't like it at all. I already feel like I play a selfless leadership role just by being a tank. I can admit that I don't like sacrificing my throughput to other players on top of that. Who would? Everyone else playing this expansion gets to choose the Covenant ability that they like, or maybe not, but that maximizes their damage and healing. And Pallies get forced into the one that buffs the other players even more and does literally nothing for themselves. This sucks. On top of those social issues, it was creating some weird gameplay situations that today's cooldown nerf partially fixed, and partially made worse. First, and this was only made worse by the nerf, you always need to be shuffling through seasons. Ideally, you won't waste a single second. This was a problem if you put Autumn on yourself, as it would reduce your blessing cooldown to 20 seconds. You would have needed to cast Winter on someone else or waste cooldown time. There is a Soulbind conduit that increases the buff duration of Summer, and that had the same effect of needing to put Summer and Autumn on different players, or you would wind up overriding them. The cooldown clipping issues have been fixed, I guess. All they had to do was cut the value of this covenant in half. That's clearly a bad design. Finally, the nature of the season rotation means you'll need to be casting your blessings even while you're out of combat, so that you can get back to the two that you really want, Summer and Autumn. Because you're going to want to start raid combats off with Summer, the setup time for Pallies could be 90 seconds. With today's nerf, that goes up to 135 seconds. Are you ready for a 2-minute and 15-second pull timer? This ability is such an incredible bummer because the abilities themselves are very appealing, aside from Winter. I love cooldown reduction, I love damage, I like healing increases, but being single target buffs instead of auras means you have to choose between whether to keep them or give them away. It's a no-win situation. As I just hinted, the initial design for this buff was auras, which affected the whole group. That greatly reduced the social pressure and the frustration of having to choose who the ability would go on. It still wasn't perfect, but choosing between 5 players in a raid or the entire Mythic Plus group, and always ensuring that you got some benefit out of the Covenant ability you opted into was way less soul-crushing than the sad state of choosing an ability that will basically just make you nothing more than a glorified buff bot. Even just making them affect yourself and another target would be enough to make this feel less horrible to use, but still, the over 2-minute setup time before pulls would make me want to burn my house down while I'm inside it. I want to like this ability, but the design is so incredibly flawed that I can't ever see being happy with it. And with the nerf today, I don't really even think it's now competitive in terms of throughput. What an absolute waste of a good idea. And last we have the Venthyr Covenant. Their signature ability is Door of Shadows, which is a ground-targeted teleport. This is helpful for teleporting past trash packs in Mythic Plus, and Paladin is definitely a class that needs as much mobility as it can get. It has a cast time, which is a bummer, but it's still pretty nice. The Paladin class ability is Ashen Hollow, and it sucks. After the long breakdown on Night Fae, that is pretty refreshing. Ashen Hollow has an insanely long cooldown and a cast time, and it deals single target damage and healing, but it still exists in a ground-targeted AoE. It truly could not suck worse if that was the goal. It's a big cooldown, and it does add a lot of damage when it's up, but the positives don't even come close to outweighing the hilarious downsides of this awful ability. At least it made the breakdown quick. I can appreciate that. Alright, time to give out letter grades to all the Covenants. I initially thought this one was going to be really tough, but today's round of nerfs made it a lot easier. Kyrian is an easy A+ in AoE and an easy F in single target. It's just so good when it's good that I feel like it's an A even with the single target limitations. Night Fae is really hard to rate. Even with its limitations and the big nerf today, it adds an enormous amount of power. It will get you brought to groups to be a buff bot, so I guess that makes it like an A- or a B+, but truly a spite-filled A- or B+. I hate this A-. Necrolord sucks a little, but it's reliable. B-. Vinthyr sucks, but also, it sucks. D-. To be honest, I was still pretty uncertain about whether I would go Kyrian or Night Fae. It is a tough choice. I knew I was going to be furious in Mythic Plus and not having Divine Toll as I'm buffing the Fire Mage, but I also still feel like I'm going to be furious about having an extra Avenger's Shield on a 1-minute cooldown in single target. I think with the nerfs today, Kyrian has moved ahead of Night Fae as the general recommendation for Prot Pallies. I'm still not 100% on that, but it seems like the right call, at least right now. And now, just in case there weren't enough systems in Shadowlands, it's the Crafted Legion Legendary system. You can control what power you get and the secondary stats on the item, so it is a substantial improvement over Legion's clumsy RNG system. We'll start with Prot-specific legendaries, then move on to general Paladin legendaries. First up is the Ardent Protector's Sanctum. Pally legendaries have insanely long names. My voice is already getting tired and I have like 16,000 more words just of legendary names left to go. Ardent Defender is only worth about 20% damage reduction, so bumping that up is nice, and sharing it with the other tank is nice too. That being said, I would never use this. They can get an external cooldown if they need it, so can I. Why give up a better legendary bonus for that? Bulwark of Righteous Fury makes Avenger's Shield increase the damage of Shield of the Righteous. It's a pretty simple effect. It adds damage, and nothing else. 40% is a big number, but Shield of the Righteous deals relatively minor damage. This isn't bad, but it's not great. I could see this being more useful maybe a patch or two into the expansion when we're allowed to equip 2 legendaries, because you know that's coming. I think it'll be good then, but as a first one, I see this pretty much as being worthless. Holy Avenger's Engraved Sigil is another insanely long name. Come on, name it something shorter, like Holy Gem. Holy Gem will substantially increase your Avenger's Shield casts, and with Avenger's Shield being more defensively powerful than ever, there's really nothing not to love about that. Seriously, Prot Paladin absolutely rocks with this bonus. I will be using Holy Gem. And Reign of Endless Kings rounds out the Prot Pally legendaries. 20% is a really low amount of health for an emergency cooldown. There's actually pretty useful synergy there. Buying yourself a second or two to cast Word of Glory on yourself for a massive heal is nice, and 45 seconds is a short cooldown for this kind of effect. Still, I won't ever wear this. I won't even make it. I hate this kind of bonus. The activation window is too low, and the benefits are too small to give up Holy Gem. Now let's move on to the general Pally bonuses, with From Dusk Till Dawn. It's a great name, and a great movie. I love that movie. This legendary sucks, though. The bonuses are too small, and the uptime is too low to justify the weird change of playstyle required to optimize this legendary. As protection, it's dangerous and weak. Liadrin's Fury Reborn gives sudden huge bursts of holy power, which is nice, but holy power is not really that hard to come by, and I just don't think this is ever going to be competitive. The Magistrate's Judgment is sort of a resource generator option, but not exactly. It's clearly good, and similar to Holy Gem, but not quite. It adds offensive and defensive value onto Judgment and Crusader's Judgment, which is great. Unfortunately, it reduces synergy with Righteous Protector, so it's almost certainly not going to be as good as Holy Gem. It's usable as Ret and Holy, so that is a nice advantage if you know you're interested in making something more useful for the other specs, but I know for certain that Ret is more interested in Badge of the Mad Paragon, which would be amazing for Prot, but my understanding is that you can't equip legendaries cross-spec. That may have changed, in which case that would also be a terrific choice, but I don't think it has. Shame. And finally, it's Uther's Guard, which sucks. It could be a useful utility option, and it will probably make you very annoying in PvP. But I don't really want to sacrifice any of my awesome throughput options for a little bit of CDR on blessings. No thank you. So yeah, Prot Paladin is terrific. They feel like a whole new class. They have all the same powerful utility you know and love, wrapped in a new, more powerful offensive rotation. I'm really excited to play Prot Pally in Shadowlands, and I hope you are too. Well, I think that about covers it. If you have any questions about Prot Paladins in Shadowlands, ask away. Stay tuned for more Shadowlands content, and thanks for watching. Bye.